This presentation will provide a critical reflection on child development by outlining the development characteristics of children from birth to 12 years, theories of development, cultural diversity, and their implications for teaching. The study of childhood development can be categorized into three different areas. Physical development is the process of gross motor and fine motor development. Cognitive development is the construction of thought processes, problem solving, and decision making, and social emotional development is the development of self-concept, self-esteem, and the ability to express feelings and form relationships with others. Whilst these three areas can be studied separately, they are highly interrelated, and one area can influence the development of another. Child development can be studied in different time periods. In this presentation, 4 time periods will be addressed, beginning at infancy, which is from birth to 2 years, early childhood from 2 to 6 years, middle childhood from 6 to 10 years, and early adolescence from 10 to 12 years. Whilst child development can be explored in time periods, it is necessary to remember that these are only a rough guide and that all children develop in their own time. The first 2 years of life is a period of fast physical growth. The gross motor development seen in infants begins as they lift their head, roll over, reach and grasp objects, to then sit, crawl, and pull themselves upwards into the standing position, ready for the important task of walking. Walking comprises of unsteady first steps to independent movement, followed by climbing and then running. Infants also develop their fine motor skills, which include the functions involving the wrist, palm, and fingers. Fine motor development that infants acquire is the pencil grip, the ability to stack objects, use crayons, and a spoon for eating. In infancy, cognitive development is acquired through sensory exploration as children begin to hold, bang, and shake objects, as well as investigate objects by mouthing them. Infants acquire object permanence, imitate others, and begin to think and move intentionally. From birth to 3 months, children begin to form primary bonds and secondary attachments with their primary caregivers. From 3 to 6 months, children begin to recognize familiar voices and take turns in mimicking sounds in conversation as they begin to show preference for familiar people. As they develop from 6 to 18 months, children show separation anxiety and become wary of unfamiliar people. During the period from 2 to 6, a child's fine and gross motor skills are at the point where they can do many things independently, such as dressing and undressing themselves, toileting and hand washing. Their gross motor strength, agility, flexibility, balance, and coordination improves as they acquire the skills to explore obstacle courses, jump on the spot, propel themselves along a tricycle, and catch a large ball. Their fine motor development allows them to hold a pencil and brush using the pencil grip, thread beads, and cut with scissors. As a child's memory starts to increase during 2 to 6 years of age, children are able to sort, identify, and recognize common objects, count numbers, and enjoy exploring symbolic and imaginary play. During this stage, children start to become more engaged with peers and play cooperatively in small groups. Educators should support turn-taking and sharing as children during this stage of development begin to claim ownership of objects and belongings. During middle childhood, children develop upon their gross motor skills by engaging in organized sport, which also aids the development of hand-eye coordination. Their fine motor ability also develops further as they begin to engage in tasks such as writing. Cognitively, a child acquires basic reading skills and develops skills in mathematics as well as other academic areas. They understand that other people may have different thoughts and are able to see another's point of view. At this stage, children are able to adapt their behavior to respond appropriately to others and situations. They are able to demonstrate empathy and compassion for others and develop a sense of fairness. With early adolescence brings a number of physical changes as children enter puberty and their childlike bodies begin to change. The release of hormones during this development stage results in a number of physical changes such as facial hair for boys and the beginning of the menstrual cycle for girls. Early adolescence marks the beginning of abstract thinking. Children have an increased ability to learn and apply skills and extend their way of thinking. Their interpretive ability also develops as they are exposed to advanced academic content. As a result of these physical changes, children start to become self-conscious and start to question how their peers see them. This is because there is a heavier focus on relationships with peers as their friendships broaden. Listed within this slide is a number of theorists across 3 development areas. Within the next few slides, the works of theorists Maria Montessori, Jean Piaget, and Erick Erickson will be highlighted in more detail. The Montessori method teaches children through hands-on activities which engages their fine and gross motor skills. Maria Montessori believed that a child learns through engaging with a stimulating, child-oriented environment that they are able to explore freely. In her view, children learn through their senses. Looking naturally becomes reading, and touching naturally becomes writing. Jean Piaget believes there are 4 stages of human development, which he called the cognitive development theory. The first stage he called sensory motor, sensory meaning the 5 senses are being used to understand the world, motor referring to the use of muscles. In the sensory motor stage, the child only knows what he or she experiences physically. The second stage is pre-operational, where children start to learn by using language and mental images. The third stage is the concrete operational stage, where children start to understand other points of view and start to understand logic, and they learn conservation. The final stage in Piaget's theory is formal operational, where children start to use abstract thinking and know the difference between right and wrong, and recognize that there are many ways of looking at things. Erick Erickson focused on the idea of identity and developed a timeline of psychological development which consists of 8 stages, 5 of which will be outlined. Erickson said that if a person had difficulty with any of the stages, they would have a problem later in life, which he called an identity crisis. Erickson identified specific social tasks that need to emerge in the 8 stages for healthy development. The first is trust versus mistrust, shaped by a caregiver's responsiveness to the baby. Autonomy versus doubt comes when a child learns that they are their own person who is able to talk and walk and is not attached to their parent or parents. Erickson's third stage is initiative versus guilt. This is when a child succeeds at trying new things. When a child does not experience success, they will start to feel guilty for not being successful. Industry versus inferiority is where a child starts to recognize that his or her actions affect how people treat him or her. Identity versus role confusion occurs during adolescence, when a child either develops a strong sense of identity or role confusion, where attempts may be made to either fit in or to completely separate from others. A child's development is shaped by their social and cultural environment, this meaning their class, race, nationality, ethnicity, religion, and culture. A range of cultural and family factors will influence physical growth and development. Different cultural and family traditions, beliefs, values, expectations, and child-rearing practices can have an influence on development. For example, in some cultures, children are expected to be independent and self-efficient at an early age, whereas in other cultures, children are not expected to do anything for themselves until they are beyond the preschool years. The way a child communicates can also be reflective of culture. For example, some children may be bilingual and speak another language other than English at home, which has implications on their early language development. In Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island culture, raising children is considered a shared responsibility of all community members, and values such as interdependence, group cohesion, and community loyalty are key features of family and community life. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities allow children to freely engage and learn from the world, and the elderly help children understand the practical aspect of life and society. The implications for teaching include getting to know each child individually and develop relationships with their families. The learning environment should be inclusive, safe, and supportive, and activities should ensure that children of all different cultural backgrounds and development speeds are included. Cultural competence is reflected in the National Quality Framework, the Early Years Learning Framework, and the Australian National Curriculum. Each of these documents recognise the importance of diversity and ensure the inclusion of all children is reflected in teaching.